Hello and welcome. My name is Russell Trafford-Jones and this is Broadcast Focus, and thanks for joining me. We talk here to the people behind the broadcast industry. So very pleased today to talk to Lisa Collins, who's the founder of the Media Tech Sustainability Series.
Hi, thanks for having me. Co-founder, actually, Russell.
Well, indeed. Sorry, I should have said co-founder. Of course, we've already spoken to Barbara Lange on the show about sustainability and who explained the MTSS. But I mean, do you want to give us a little bit of an idea about the MTSS?
Yeah, absolutely. Two years ago now, Barbara and I came together. We both have a passion for, I guess, ESG and moving that forward within the industry. It's one of those gaps within the industry that just isn't moving forward, and there needs to be a lot more education. And with both of our trade association backgrounds, we both want to make a difference. So 2 years ago, we came together, we did our very, very first event, and it attracted 800 people online. And after we decided we can't leave it here, you know, there's some real interest. So the sustainability series was formed. And now here we are today delivering all sorts of content completely free of charge, just to move the needle forward on sustainability, get people talking about what they're doing and making change.
So there's online events throughout the year, and when we're at a trade show anyway, there's what was the thing that you did at IBC?
So our exhibitor, the sustainable exhibitor stamp.
Yes.
And you know, that's really important. Exhibitors need to consider, you know, we're an industry of trade shows, going to a different show every month, and exhibitors really need to consider their carbon footprint. So if we can award those ones doing great things, even if it's small on their actual trade show booth, then we're keen to do so and highlight them. But yeah, online events, events alongside trade shows if they're already happening, and then knowledge and education on the website as well.
It's good because we both have an interest in ESG. I spotted that Sony had released a report, and I thought it might just be interesting for us to look through. I'm sure they'd be happy for us to look through as well, because the more people who read it, the happier they'll be. And this really aims to look at the state of the industry. So it's not the longest report, but it does give a few insights, really. We've got Olivier Bovis from Sony Europe, who's kind of heading this up. And I think we should acknowledge and give credit where credit's due. They went to their own customers and presumably suppliers and asked over 8 countries, UK, Germany, Poland, Spain, France, Italy, Denmark, and Sweden, various questions. So it's not too bad a representation. What do you think in terms of the countries, Lisa?
Yeah, I think it's interesting in terms of the countries that they have there. Obviously, this is very much a UK focus. And I think UK and Europe are far ahead when it comes to sustainability and actions being taken. So interesting report, but hats off to Sony for doing this. And, you know, as you said at the start, it's a short report, but right now you'd expect it to be a short report because many of us in the industry are only just starting our sustainability journey. So what they've got here is some really interesting insights and thought-provoking information, I would say.
So it says here nearly 3/4 of respondents said their employer had implemented operational changes to reduce its environmental impact. And I think this is one of those stats which is both useful, but we just need to be just bear in mind that any operational change is enough for somebody to say yes, and that could be almost nothing. Again, like as you're saying, I don't want to be dismissive of anything because the whole thing's made up of small things. But if it's one small thing, that's really different to an organization which has embraced it and is starting, albeit right at the beginning, to make notable, impactful changes.
Yeah, and I think, you know, those employers or employees that are noticing the changes are probably seeing cutbacks in travel, maybe some changes to buildings. You know, are they putting solar panels on there? And really making changes in terms of their day-to-day practice. And, you know, and those are the bits that they're going to be impacted on. So you'd expect those numbers to be quite high. it talks about travel there and headcount
Yeah.
needed on site, and we're seeing that the number of staff on trade show booths is being reduced. The number of people traveling out to trade shows, certainly from a broadcaster's perspective, those numbers are coming down. So interesting stats there, definitely. But the real bit for me is, what are they doing behind the scenes rather than what's being visible? And data collection, is it happening? Are they benchmarking themselves year on year?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned about the trade shows, though, because all of the conversations I've heard about people not going to trade shows is sort of about penny pinching rather than the environmental cost. I don't know. Have you got any?
I think it could be used in both ways. So covering up the story, and suggesting it's a penny pinching exercise, and we're looking at budgets, opposed to it's a sustainability initiatives. I think from a broadcaster's perspective, and some of those big names, they are pulling back because of sustainable initiatives, most definitely. On the vendor side, I think there's still some education there, most definitely, and perhaps finance comes in the way of that sustainable decision-making process.
Okay. The opposite seems to be true here, in the sense that less than half of employers are actively investing money, and that's a theme that we'll see through this, I think.
Yeah, most definitely.
A lot of the time we actually talk about reducing compute, effectively saving energy, which should therefore come across as a saving, but there's so many other aspects which actually need investment that it's difficult, really. Can't all be money saving, unfortunately.
No, it can't. But on that, sustainability, it's a financial long-term gain. It's not about the here and now, it's about the future. And if you aren't in the space of investing in those new sustainable practices, then it's going to have knock-on effects in the future, be that bringing in younger talent who really are passionate about sustainability, or working with your customers who are going to start rating you on your sustainable practices. So I would say it's a long-term investment.
Yeah. And I think just at the end here, it talks about what 32% actively report on the sustainability practices and their outcomes. Now, that's, I guess, report is probably an outwards that doesn't cover how many people are measuring it. But on the other hand, if you're going to do something, you're going to measure it.
And I think that's an issue we've got as an industry, Russell. That data collection and that measuring, it's just not there at the moment. Be that an individual organisation or benchmarking us across the rest of the industry, that data collection isn't happening. And for us to make a change, it needs to happen quite soon, definitely.
I feel kind of strongly about this one, actually. Are buyers considering sustainability? Because I think that without those strong persuasive elements, should we call them, parts of RFPs or indeed regulation, then it's not going to necessarily get through to everybody. And there's an interesting statistic here saying 11% of people say the environmental impact of a product is the most important consideration. So it feels like it's a low number, but when you're buying something, I feel perhaps it's hard to state that environmental impact is the most important consideration. And perhaps that is the mental state that we should be transitioning into. It's not where my mind is. And we can see that it's only where 11% of people are.
Yeah, 11. So looking at this, it's not the top consideration right now, but it is a consideration. And you talked about RFPs. Broadcasters and media organisations are adding sustainability into their RFPs, and there is going to be a requirement that if they do move forward, that product, solution, service has to have some sort of sustainable investment within it. And I think we'll see more of that. So yes, it's not the top, but it's definitely a consideration. And yes, you are going to look at quality and you're going to look at cost, but the key thing for me there is it's there. Sustainability is something they're looking at.
Yeah, I wish there was a little bit more info really about what people are really doing here. And because I think it's very reasonable to say that cost, as it says here, 55% said that cost of new products and services were more important. And I think everybody's operating a business, and the numbers have to add up at the end of the day. So that almost has to be your most important thing, because otherwise, if it costs too much, there literally is no point in doing it.
I do wonder how much that 11% will change also moving forward. A lot of the big broadcasters have set their own goals when it comes to sustainability, and they're out there, they're public facing, and they need to reach those goals.
That's exactly, and that's what the next section is about. It's 11% ranked customers as their biggest influence. I assume we're talking about broadcasters exclusively here, with further 4% naming viewers. And that's that public accountability. If you are a big name and you've stated something, then at the end of the day, someone's going to wait till 2030 and tap you on the shoulder and ask how things are going, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think customers or regulators are going to, certainly for the vendor community, is really where it's going to be at.
Absolutely.
And, it's a bit of a shame in one sense, and it's not to say there aren't suppliers who are really taking this seriously, but on the other hand, there's a little bit of give and take, isn't there, commercially?
Yeah.
Here we've got some more numbers. 49% say that costs is a significant barrier to reducing environmental impact. So just to put into perspective, what types of things really require investment in order to achieve sustainability? Can you think of any examples where...
This is the bit that really confuses me. Cost is a significant barrier. Well, is it a significant barrier? And again, it depends which respondents we're talking to here. If you're a broadcaster and you're making that investment in new tech, then yes, potentially cost is going to be a barrier. But that then can change around, because they have to make those changes to hit their sustainable goals. So it's a little bit of a difficult question here. And is that cost barrier about education and people not realizing or understanding how easy some of the sustainable practices can be? If you were going to invest in something like B Corp and you're going to change your whole company process, then yes, there could be some cost implications. But it's a cultural thing. The culture, and we'll talk about culture, I guess, shortly, needs to be changed in order to become more sustainable. Well, it is down there, 46%, citing industry culture and behaviours. And I think they perhaps come hand in hand. If you've got a culture where you believe, look, it's been quite public, the ex-Google guy coming out and suggesting that we'll never, ever hit our sustainable goals. So let's invest as much as possible into those data centers for AI. Yep. If you've got that sort of culture, nothing's ever going to change.
No, indeed. And I think that there's a few different situations, isn't there? We've got the broadcaster who has made their pledges, and so they need to succeed, or they need to find the money. We've got the organizations, whether they're suppliers or otherwise, that have got regulation. And people tend to say that when regulation pops up, then the money tends to pop up.
Absolutely.
And then you've got, I can't remember how many vendors there are at IBC, but it's at least 1,000. You've got all these thousands of companies who are independently making their way in the world. And I wonder whether for them it's more, the money's a barrier because the motivation is really the barrier.
Yeah, and it would be great to be a little bit more granular on that 49%, which segment actually said that. And have a look. Yeah, be interesting.
And to the same point, 52% say sustainability is at least sometimes considered in the procurement process. And I tend to feel that tends to be a problem. And I think it's changing, but where even if it is there, perhaps it's only marked at 5% of the overall kind of pricing scheme.
And I think, Russell, again, I think that comes back down to culture, doesn't it? When I make my own personal buying decisions these days, actually sustainability is near the top of my, the car I drive, the products I purchase. I'm looking at the plastic, but that's because it's in my culture and, my beliefs.
That's a fair point, yeah.
If you haven't got that, then it's not going to be top of the game, is it?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And we can see here with the 11% that basically it exists, that it's a driver, but it's a very small driver. This section here is really about saying that perception is important and people want to be perceived. I'm a little bit surprised at 40%, to be honest. I would have thought that almost all companies would want to be seen as sustainable. And, we are talking about perception here. We're not talking about whether there's any meat on the bone. But 40%, do you think 40% is a bit low?
No, I don't, because I think there are too many organisations out there right now worried about greenwashing. And, working on MTSS, we find it really hard to engage with companies to come out and share their case studies, because they actually feel they need to be at the end of their process so they can talk about where we are, we've done it, rather than we're doing bits of it, because that, again, it's a cultural thing. We don't say, oh, we've just started this. You want to talk about the end product, but sustainability is a journey. It's ongoing. It's you're never going to be at the end, and it's about encouraging people, as you say, to say, we've made a start, we're on our journey, and these are the things that we are doing right now, and this is what we're going to be doing in the future. So I'm not surprised that the number's so low. I think that people are nervous out there about saying the wrong thing. And again, that's back down to education, isn't it?
It's an interesting perspective, and I guess something like the MTSS with an ongoing dialogue can gradually show people that it's okay to talk, and I've always felt that transparency is an important thing. So it's like, if you just lay it out, sometimes it is dangerous because you feel like you're exposing whether it's projects or your technology or what you've been up to. In this case, environmental impact. It's like, well, we've measured, we've reported twice, and there's a few bits that we're working on. This is our goal. I can see why that's seen by some as a sign of weakness rather than strength, I guess.
Yeah. And then it's the same with this next question. No, the industry isn't doing enough. However, there's a lot going on behind closed doors for the same reason of the 40%, and us not talking about it. The reason it's going on behind closed doors is because those participants, they don't want to be out there in public talking about what the issues and the problems are and the problems that they're facing, because it's not great for them commercially. However, it needs to be talked about. So I'm going to lots of events where Chatham House rules, and I know, and I've seen it on LinkedIn, people are frustrated about that. But right now, just to get those conversations started, it's behind closed doors. And I'd love to see more public facing stuff, and Barbara and I are always keen to get on the stage and tell the story. But if we're going to create any change, all sides of the party need to come together in a room and talk about how we're going to do it as a collective. And right now, they're not happy about doing that in public. I think they will, and I think there will be progress. But an interesting point.
And so I think the last section really is this is probably worth looking at these icons, which talk about the key barriers to industry-wide adoption. So what is the biggest problem? So we've talked about this financial investment required one already. Basically, it's convincing the board that we need a bit more money and that it's worth doing. So that's as much cultural perhaps as financial. And
it's about that long-term gain again. Think about the long term rather than the short term and what it's going to cost. And
exactly.
Don't make that investment now. Think about what might happen in the long term.
Yeah, and I just want to acknowledge that it feels like it's probably very easy for us both to sit here and say, well, you can find the money if you need to. And, at a time when many companies are finding it very difficult, and there are travel bans for real financial reasons.
I just wonder also, Russell, sustainability, we're not going to get there on our own, and maybe not thinking about it in isolation and coming together with others. Collaboration's key when sustainability is involved. And could you come together with a group of partners that then reduces that financial investment that's required? We see some great accelerators at IBC. EcoFlow was one of them. Maybe looking like that in a way that you've never ever worked before could help with the investment that's actually required.
Third one, availability of sustainable products or services. I think that's a very valid one.
I think it's valid, but I think we're seeing change. So on the MTSS website, we do have a product listing that's growing. And the Corporate Star Awards, we had the most entries ever in the product category this year. So
that's good.
products are coming,
Yeah.
and that's exciting.
And I think services as well, though, it's interesting because people will put up a service. Let's assume it's a SaaS thing, and there isn't a lot that's said about how green it is, and also when people say, well, we've got efficient code, again, there's not really anything that you can prove behind that. So I can understand also if you're looking for a sustainability angle to help you choose between SaaS products, there's probably not a lot to go on, really.
Yeah.
And then this penultimate one, no industry-wide policies. I wanted to talk about almost 25% say that's a barrier. I think it might be nice if there were some more industry-wide policies, but on the other hand, I don't know what they would be, and I don't really quite have a concept of what a global effect. It has to be global to be industry-wide. A global policy would be, but we have seen that the EU policies and laws, regulations have done quite a lot. Like GDPR has affected people outside of the EU. So is the DMA, for better or for worse. So what's the new one that's coming up?
So the one that's already there,
and
companies, public companies. If you're a public company this year, you will have to report on the CSRD, which is the new European reporting initiative, and this year is the first year, so it'd be great. It's going to be really interesting to see what that reporting's like. But other organisations, and they've done it on size, so they're built. That's how they're doing it. Will have to start reporting. So, watching what those large public organisations do this year is going to be important for some of those smaller organisations that will have to do it in the future.
So the wording here is that if you generate revenue from the EU, you have to report. So that
you will do, and everybody will do, but they're phasing it in depending on the size of your organisation.
So that's an example of where you may not be in the EU, but you're part of doing business in the EU. So you could be an American multinational.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And likewise, we heard this month, Canada has brought in a similar initiative, and so has California. So they're coming, they're really coming, and we need to be prepared for them because going back to that financial and investment, you're going to have to do it. So yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you for that. This is basically the end of the report, and I think it's just worth doing. Something I like doing on the show. Just have a look through, and I think sometimes there's some interesting numbers that are just worth realizing because there's no point in people doing any research if we don't take notes. So I really appreciate your input, your angle.
Pleasure, and hats off to Sony for releasing this as well. Yeah. We need more of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Worth mentioning that it isn't greenwashing to click the like button and subscribe. That will show you're definitely behind ESG. Very important. Just say thank you to Fiona and Becky from Page Media for helping get Broadcast Focus running all the time. And thank you again, Lisa. I hope to speak to you again, definitely. And Barbara, and we'll keep on top of interesting topics. Thank you very much for your time, and talk to you again soon.
Thanks.